Strike. Sorry that joke's not better. My writer's on the picket line right now. That's a joke. I don't have another person write my stuff. I barely script this stuff as it is. Anyway, Writers Guild of America, the WGA, is on strike. Now, it's been a while since this has happened, but I am old enough to remember the last time that it did. And I feel like it's worth prepping folks, or reminding them if they are my age or older, what we're in for and how long-lasting the effects will actually be. First, before we get into all of that, let's talk about what the deal actually is. Writers Guild of America is the union of writers in the Hollywood system, not necessarily specifically located within Hollywood, but members of the union, they get priority work in anything that is of a certain professional scale, a certain studio or network size. There is an expectation to have, if not a complete staff of union writers, at least a majority of them, depending on the specifics of the production. Now, the WGA is one of a couple of big unions within the Hollywood system. There's also the Directors Guild, the DGA. There is the Screen Actors Guild, otherwise known as SAG. Actually, Hollywood in general is a very unionized town and business. A lot of it is in unions. And unions sometimes means that when contracts are up and you're negotiating for the next cycle, well, if negotiations break down, folks go on strike. And the WGA was not able to resolve some conflicts with the American motion picture and television producers. They weren't able to come to an accord. Now, the main sticking point is it's what you'd expect it to be, probably. Well, it is money related. Most union strikes are either money or safety related. And since this is not a business, or at least an aspect of the business known for worker compensation issues for injuries and whatnot, then yeah, it is about the direct income. So residuals in this case. It has to do with residuals coming in on streaming. Now, writers do get residuals for streaming. That's actually one of the things that they got as a concession when they struck the last time, and I will be talking about that. The thing is, though, it's very clear that what it was that had been arranged before, which was done before the full scope of what streaming was going to look like, was even clear. So the nature of the specifics of the contract were in such a way that while writers do get, well, if they are union writers, do get residuals off of streaming, it's currently being handled in such a way that writers who have gotten a lot of work on streaming, who were getting work, say, in network or at major movie studios before, are seeing a massive drop in their income. So while there aren't no residuals for streaming writing, they are not lining up with what they get compensated in other avenues. And the WGA is looking to remedy that, as well as some other things, but the residuals is the big thing. And yeah, they weren't able to come to an agreement. And so the strike is now going on. Hey, it's me in the editing phase. Just real quick. It isn't just residuals. There's also some issues over the threat to getting rid of writers' rooms. Breaking that down real quick, writers' rooms are used to produce TV shows, and it allows writers to basically have a salary and be contracted for the full run of however long a show is going, or at the very least for the length of its season. And those are going away in favor of one-off contract situations, which just pay out far less and also are much less stable. I'll actually let Adam Conover take it from here and give his explanation, because he was quite succinct.
This is a room that's existed for decades where writers get together and break a story and write scripts. The companies are trying to eliminate it. They're trying to make the room smaller. They're trying to employ us on a freelance basis. They'd rather we just stay home and email scripts in, and they pay us a fee every once in a while. And we can't make a living that way.
I'm not really going to focus on the political aspects of the strike. I will say, broadly speaking, I am pro-union and solidarity to them. Good on them. I hope it goes their way. Because my general thing, and anyone who's like, oh, they just want more money, is like, no, they want their fair share of the money that's in the system. Because, like, there's a ton of money in this. It's just not going to them. And maybe some more of it should be, especially if folks who are focusing on streaming writing are getting way less than those in other areas of the industry. I say that's messed up. I say that's worth striking over. But I'm not going to dwell too long on that. Let's talk about the practical outcome of this. What's the actual impact going to be? Well, any WGA writer is not to be working on anything that would be a union gig. When you talk about smaller independent stuff, which don't necessarily involve union work, or maybe even have union workers but have negotiated to not be working at union wages, it gets a little bit weird and case specific. But major studios, movie studios, television networks, major streaming services, all work has stopped for writing. Now, the most immediate impact of that is that basically any show with a writing staff that has a nightly output is just done until this is resolved. So that's your late night talk show sort of things. That's your Tonight Show, Late Show, Daily Show, anything like that. Saturday Night Live, that one's weekly, but anything where they have quick turnaround. And these things are not written and produced well in advance. They basically are shot and aired later the same day or close to it. Yep, that stuff's all done for the time being. So that stuff's already closed down. Anything that is shot weekly, you're also going to see dry up for the time being. And they're just going to have to settle for reruns or putting something else in the time slot. They just basically can do nothing. So that's the most immediate impact that is seen. However, the period over which the impacts of a prolonged strike, and a guess from a lot of experts, is to nail down the negotiations and get this thing settled is probably going to take a month, maybe two. That's a lengthy strike. That's a decent length strike. Now, that's far from the longest strike that even the Writers Guild has ever taken, much less any of Hollywood has taken. But that is pretty significant. And that sets off a chain reaction that we will be seeing the effects of for a while. And that's where it helps to reference the last time, which that strike was in 2007. And I forget how long it lasted off the top of my head, but it definitely lasted long enough that we were seeing its impacts well into the next year. And that's the thing. I mentioned things with quick turnaround, like nightly talk shows or whatnot, that are they're just toast for the time being. There's plenty of stuff that is even in production right now. And obviously anything that's in post-production, that's already been shot, that's just going to move forward as normal. And even a lot of stuff that's in production, if the script is locked in, then that can move forward more or less as normal. Though possibly with still some impact. I'll circle back to that again with some examples of how that panned out last time. But don't expect to see a major impact on scripted, high production TV shows or movies this year. Or at least not until the tail end of the year. Going into next year is when we're really going to see the impacts. Now, what kind of impacts would those be that would be so delayed? Well, it is generally going to result in delayed projects, things coming out just flatly later than they're supposed to. In the case of network TV shows, scripted network TV shows, truncated or shortened seasons where they're just not going to have as many episodes as they would have otherwise. And we're going to get some odd movies. Some movies with some really underbaked scripts, because it's not that the studios can't move forward and use the scripts that are written. It's just the writers can't do new work. So the thing is, this strike didn't come out of nowhere. It was bubbling up, and everyone knew there was a chance it could happen. So any smart studio was going to try and get in finished scripts before this deadline hit. And if they were planning far enough in advance, maybe they got a decent number of finished scripts in and they'll be okay to coast for a while. But what that can also mean is Scripts may have been thrown together hastily to hit a deadline that would not have been their deadline except for the looming strike. You get stuff thrown together haphazardly, which wouldn't be as much of a problem in and of itself, except the writers can't adjust the script otherwise. See, I mentioned things already in production are mostly going to be unaffected, but not entirely. Because depending on the nature of the production, especially if there are reshoots on something, once the initial edit is done and they realize, what they're missing or what they could use or need, writers are still on hand to write new material, revise the material. Sometimes you have a script doctor, or sometimes you have the original script writer, on hand to make adjustments to the script because of things being altered, or what is or isn't working on screen, or maybe a certain actor is no longer available and their part needs to be shortened, or the location change, or whatever. The writer has to be the one to make those changes to the script. The director can't make those changes to the script. An actor can improv lines, but an actor can't make those changes to the script. That's part of the union rules. The writers are the ones who work on it. And if they're not there and they're not working, then whatever problems are in what is in theory a finished script, you can't really fix them. Not major structural issues at any rate. Like, again, actors can improv lines. That's not the problem. It's if you get in there and start shooting and realize, oh, wait, like because of this other thing that we decided wasn't worth filming, we now have a plot hole and we can't write a new scene to cover for it. Because we're not allowed to do it because it's a union gig and the writers are striking. And that's how you get scripts like Transformers Revenge of the Fallen. That was very much a writer's strike product. And when that movie came out, everybody was trying to blame everybody else for the state of the thing. But a lot of people did circle back on the idea of, well, whether you want to blame the screenwriters in the abstract, at the very least you have to grant whatever state the script was in, whether it was their fault or input of the director's fault or whatever else, it couldn't be polished. It couldn't be fixed. They were stuck with a very rough script and a movie that had already been set up and scheduled and whose budgetary items and whose expected release date were all locked in, and the studio couldn't really move them that much. And that's the other thing. You might just think to yourself, a couple months, just delay stuff. What's the big problem? Well, fiscal years is the big problem. Investors is the big problem. You are expected to still be making product. You are expected to still be bringing in revenue. And at the start of your fiscal year, you would have told your investors, here's the timing that we're expecting for this stuff. And maybe you can move one thing out a little bit, but you can't move everything out by months because suddenly you have a massive hole where basically no income is coming in. They can't afford that. Well, they could if they were willing to take a hit to their growth because, of course, these days it's not enough for a major corporation to be profitable. They have to be more profitable than they were last year. And that's where we get into just the inherent issues with the current hyper-capitalist hellscape that we are existing in. But, these things are expected to land at a certain time in terms of when the money is allocated to pay for them and when they are expected to start generating revenue. And as I said, yeah, some things you can delay. I mean, some movies do get delayed. Some TV shows do get delayed. But you delay one thing and everything else stays on schedule, you can get away with that. You delay everything? So stuff gets pushed forward. And that's also how you end up with what I mentioned before with truncated television seasons and things like that, because you'll have, once the strike eventually resolves, you'll have writers come in who are going to be coming in and trying to put together their next season of television. Because you need to understand, the union rules isn't just that, like, you can't turn in a script. They can't work on it at all. Now, it's a little bit of a squidgy thing, like, how do you monitor what someone does in their own time? And if they're writing in their own time, what's the thing? But like, if they get caught doing that, they could be expelled from the union. Like, that would be a big problem. It's one of those things where, like, it's kind of hard to get caught doing, but if you do, you're screwed. So, say a showrunner for a TV show, even if that first season's wrapped up, done, all set, they can't work on the next season. They can't. It's a network production. They cannot work on it. They can think about it, sure, but they cannot be typing up scripts to just be ready to go for when the strike's over, because that's working. That's what they're paid to do, and they're striking on that right now. And so that's where you get situations where they come back after the strike is eventually resolved, and suddenly the network is going, look, we still expect this. We still were hoping for this show to start airing at a certain time. And obviously we can't because we're starting late, but we still expect the back end to land in the exact same time. So suddenly you lose the front half of your season order because they're not going to shift to the entire season. They're just going to have the season start late, but still end when they plan to have it end. So suddenly you go from 20 episodes to 11. That's what happened to shows like Heroes with its second season. Pushing Daisies was another one back in the 2007-2008 strike that really, really took a hit for these exact kind of reasons. And that time as well, that strike was initiated by issues of residuals. At the time then, the major focus was DVD and things like that, and residuals related to those things. It did set up, it did sort of understand that streaming was on the horizon. And so, like, the fact that most streaming writing gigs are union gigs, that's actually thanks to that eventual contract negotiation from the last strike. But again, as I said, they didn't know exactly what that landscape was going to look like. And at this point, they want to renegotiate so that the residuals actually line up with the kind of living that you need to be able to make to, eat and have it be contiguous with the kind of residuals that they would expect from television, network television or movies. And currently it isn't.
We want to make sure that writers are paid the same in streaming as they are on television. My first show was for True TV. My second show was for Netflix. The show had the exact same format, but on Netflix, we had no minimums, we had no protections, we were paid less. The residuals are literally 1% of what they were.
Yeah, we're going to see long-lasting impacts, and it's worth remembering now because we're going to get into 2024. And we're going to get shortened seasons of television, and we're going to get movies coming out that it's like, that thing seemed really off. That seemed really undercooked. That seemed like it had no polish at all, like with the story. This will be why. And like, the thing is, writers get screwed a lot. The WGA has struck more than any other guild in Hollywood because they've had to. Because writers are treated as disposable. And it's kind of understandable why on a certain level, because with movie stars, like, they can be replaced, but like, it's clear that you did so. Visibly, you can tell somebody else is there. Directors, depending on the nature of the flair, they bring the nature of the directorial touches and sort of visual signatures and storytelling aspects that they bring. Maybe you can tell when a director changed. When a writer changes, there aren't that many writers with that clear, distinctive voice, or at least that's going to survive whatever additional flair is brought by the actors and the directors. So they are seen as far more replaceable. They are seen that, in theory, if you have a script, if it's written by this one writer versus this other writer, are people really going to notice the difference that much? I mean, maybe, maybe not, but it's a lot harder to prove. And so they're seen as more theoretically replaceable, disposable, and they are compensated much less, despite the fact that when the Writers Guild strikes, nothing gets done. Because if you don't have a script, you can't get started. And if you don't have writers, you can't fix a script that isn't working. So I'll just say, I think they're well within their rights to strike. They're treated as one of the least important aspects, and I'm not necessarily going to argue that they are more important than the others, but like, folks, you need the writers. And I don't think they're asking for anything unfair. But yeah, we're going to see the fallout of this for a while. What'll be interesting is that this actually is a potential boon to YouTubers, depending on how long this drags on. Because a lot of YouTube channels, even bigger YouTube channels, are non-union gigs. I mean, I joked about it. I don't have a writer. I'm not in a union. So it has the potential to fill a void. And now it's not like YouTube's suddenly going to crank out more content, but more people might find themselves migrating here if too much stuff dries up. And in some cases, because like, I don't watch a lot of late night stuff, but I do sometimes watch clips of late night shows on YouTube, which aren't there right now. But if I found something that is still being uploaded fresh and is scratching a similar itch, maybe I migrate to that. That's just supposition on my part. But yeah, this was also part of what influenced the reality TV show boom. I mean, part of it is, they're cheaper to produce because, no big names and you're usually shooting in one location. They're just cheaper. But beyond that, they're largely strike proof. There kind of are writers to some reality shows, but not in the union manner in most cases. And that's another thing you can probably expect is another surge of reality shows. Because these networks got to put up something. These streaming services have to fill the time with something. And like, they've got a backlog, sure, but new stuff drives new engagement, drives growth. And you must have growth. The writers strike. The writers strike back. No, that was stupid. I'd rewrite it, but it's too late. Did I really just do that joke again? Okay, I just proved that I don't properly script these things some of the time. But in any case, yeah, the writer's strike is going to have a bigger impact than maybe you're even thinking. What do you think about all this? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Patreon pays the bills and ensures that despite me not being in a union, I am able to do this for my living. Even if you can't help me out that way, the usual YouTube stuff helps. You know what it is. You don't need me to tell you. But what I really want you to remember, striking or not, you are beautiful. You are valid, and you are loved. You are the council. I'm just running the meeting. And until next time, this council is adjourned. Massive thanks to my Patreon supporters. And in particular, I want to thank Robin Moore, Zubin Lutfullah, Tarak, the thing that goes doink in the anime, Ruth, Oliver B., Solitary Pictures, Ulrich Bogdan, Melinda Walters, Jen, Leotha Boyd, Auntie Kate 808, Becky Sparks, Fernabulax the Poodle, Robin Powell, Tracy Scrabbit, Angry Caspero, Adam R.D.L. Taylor, David Hall, Shayla Gourlay, and Rosalind Bennett. Thanks for your support. You can get your name in the credits too if you feel like hearing me possibly struggle with it for several times before getting it right.